Ladies and gentlemen, let us all rise for the arrival of the Honorable Senate President and the Senators of the Republic of the Philippines.
Wala.
Sir, nandiyan si Senator Joe.
Bale, The 41st session of the Senate in the first regular session of the 18th Congress is hereby called to order. Let us all pause for a minute of silent prayer. Thank you. The Secretary will please call the roll.
Roll call of members, the Honorable Senators Bangarra, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Della Rosa, Drilon, Gatchalian, Go, Gordon, Lacson, Ontiveros, Lapid, Marcos, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Pimentel, Po, Recto, Revilla, Tolentino, Villanueva, Billiards, Zubiri, Senate President Soto III.
Senator Gatchalian. With 15 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Before I recognize the majority leader, we'd just like to again make mention of the importance of this day. Aside from being the birthday of our champion, Senator Manny Pacquiao, it is also the 14th wedding anniversary of our majority leader, Senator Mig Subiri, and his lively wife, Audrey. 14th. 14 na taon pa lang nagtitiis si Audrey.
Bayani si Audrey, bayani.
Alright. So, congratulations. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, yes, we'd like to greet our dear colleague, Senator Manny Pacquiao. Happy birthday. Mr. President, I heard that. Mr. President, I move that we defer the approval of the Journal of the 40th session Monday, December 16 at a later hour, Mr. President.
All right. Hearing no objection, we defer the approval.
We just have a lot of we have a few guests here, athletes from gold medalists and medalists from the Southeast Asian Games. I have two particular athletes, Mr. President, who we're pretty much proud and honored with them because they come from Bukidnon. Ma'am Christine Haliasgo of the Women's Marathon and Sarah Dequinian of Women's Heptathlon, both gold medalists from my province, Mr. President, are here with us. Please stand.
Welcome to the Senate.
Christine is our marathon winner. She's the fastest in the long distance running. We also have with us from Valenzuela. These are the SEA Games medalists from the town of, the city of Valenzuela. Meron ba tong cash gift? Kasi meron ako sa Bukidnon. Bigyan mo yung Valenzuela, Mr. President, bibigyan ni Senator Gatchalian yan. Yung anak na inchik na mayaman, bibigay. Mr. Fernando Jose Casares, gold medalist, Philippine Triathlon. We have also Nolito Jose Jr., bronze medalist of fencing men's individual epi. Baby Jessica Canabal of bronze medalist taekwondo. Women's Taekwondo, and we have also Mr. Brandon Creel Aquino, bronze medalist sailing. We also have Janelle Hayes Bataonon, gold medalist of esports, and John Michael Pasco, bronze medalist beach handball. Here with us. Please rise so that we be recognized.
Congratulations to our medalists, gold medalists.
Yan. Reminder po sa Senator from Valenzuela, yung kanilang cash gift po. Mr. President. Mr. President, we have resolutions that we'd like to take up for adoption. If I be, with the permission of the body, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that
Are these part of the order of business?
Yes, Mr. President.
I mean, in the reference of business?
Well, if resolutions can be pulled out by
Oh,
the...
yes, yes.
But we can, if you wish, we can have reference business, Mr. President. I move for the reference of business.
Yes, the secretary will proceed with reference of business.
Bills on first reading, Senate number 1238, an act granting civil service eligibility to government employees whose status of appointment is either casual or contractual and who have continuously rendered at least 7 years of efficient service, introduced by Senator Marcos.
Referred to the Committee on Civil Service.
Senate number 1239, an act establishing the Philippine Building Act of 2019, thereby repealing Presidential Decree number 1096 and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Lacson.
Referred to the Committees on Public Works and Finance.
Resolutions. Senate Concurrent Resolution number 4, entitled Concurrent Resolution urging the Bangsamoro Transition Authority to designate its representatives to the Philippine Congress Bangsamoro Parliament Forum to be created pursuant to Article 6, Section 3 of Republic Act number 11054, otherwise known as the Organic Law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, and to meet with the delegates designated by the Senate and the House of Representatives for the purpose, introduced by Senator Zubiri.
To the Committee on Rules.
PS Resolution number 277, entitled Resolution Honoring and Commending the Philippine Windsurfing Team for garnering gold medals in the 30th Southeast Asian Games, introduced by Senator Pacquiao.
To the Committee on Rules.
PS Resolution number 278, Resolution commending and congratulating the members of the Philippine national team who have competed and won medals for their astonishing performance, placing the country as the top overall champion in the 30th Southeast Asian Games, introduced by Senator Go.
To the Committee on Rules.
PS Resolution number 279, entitled Resolution Commending the Outstanding Young Men of 2019, introduced by Senator Pacquiao.
To the Archives.
PS Resolution number 280, Resolution commending and congratulating John Riel Casimero for winning the WBO Bantamweight World Championship at the Arena Birmingham in Birmingham, United Kingdom, introduced by Senator Pacquiao.
Committee on Rules.
PS Resolution number 281, Resolution congratulating and commending the medalists from the city of Valenzuela at the 30th Southeast Asian Games, introduced by Senator Gatchalian.
To the Committee on Rules.
Committee reports. Committee report number 31, prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Trade, Commerce and Entrepreneurship, Ways and Means, and Finance on Senate number 1240, with Senators Villar, Zubiri, and Pimentel III as authors thereof, entitled An Act Institutionalizing Bamboo Industry Development in the Philippines, creating the Bamboo Industry Development Center, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate numbers 337 and 524, sponsor Senator Pimentel III.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
Committee report number 32, prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Trade and Commerce and Entrepreneurship and Local Government on Senate number 1241, with Senators Rekt and Pimentel III as authors thereof, entitled An Act Institutionalizing the Establishment of Timbangan ng Bayan Centers in Public and Private Markets, amending for the purpose Chapter 2, Title 3 of Republic Act number 7394, otherwise known as the Consumer Act of the Philippines, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate number 761, sponsor Senator Pimentel III.
To the calendar of ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move that we consider proposed Senate Resolution number 245, Mr. President. This, will we take up both or one by one? Dave, do we take up both or one by one? Resolution 245, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of the measures in order.
I have an omnibus sponsorship of two resolutions, Mr. President. It's PS Resolution number 245 and PS Resolution number 246. Should we proceed one by one,
Yes,
Mr.
you
President?
may do so, unless there is an objection on the floor, you may do so.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, I take to the floor, if I may be allowed to be recognized, Mr. President.
Yes,
after-
the Senator Subiri is recognized.
After, Mr. President, we ask the Secretary to read the title of Resolution number 245. Or rather, I withdraw my motion, Mr. President, and say, with the permission of the body, I move that we take up Senate Resolution number 245 and 246, Mr. President.
All right, I think that will be better.
Yes, Mr.
Any
President.
objection? Hearing none. Motion is approved.
May I ask the Secretary to read the title of the measures, both measures, Mr. President?
The Secretary will read the title of both measures.
PS Resolution number 245, resolution congratulating and commending Christine Hallazgo for winning a gold medal in the 30th Southeast Asian Games after emerging victorious in the women's marathon at the New Clark City in Capas, Tarlac on 6 December 2019. PS Resolution number 246, resolution congratulating and commending Sara Noveno Dequinan for winning a gold medal in the 30th Southeast Asian Games after emerging victorious in the women's heptathlon at the Athletic Stadium in the New Clark City in Capas, Tarlac on 8 December 2019.
Mr. President, if I may be recognized. to
Majority
give the
Leader, yes,
sponsorship speech.
you're recognized.
Thank you. I take to the floor today, Mr. President, to congratulate two women from Bukidnon who brought pride to our province and to the nation by netting gold medals in the Southeast Asian Games. For women's marathon held in New Clark City on the 6th of December 2019, 27-year-old Christine Hallazgo from Malaybalay City, Bukidnon, stormed through the competition to a triumphant gold medal finish, completing the 42-kilometer race in only 2 hours, 56 minutes, and 56 seconds. This win was an underdog surprise and a stunning upset coming from a first-time SEA Games competitor. For the women's heptathlon held in New Clark City on the 8th of December 2019, Sara Noveno Dequinan brought to the country's name a similar acclaim. The 23-year-old athlete from Valencia, Bukidnon collected 5,101 points through the 100-meter hurdles, the high jump, the shot put, the 200-meter run, the long jump, the javelin throw, and the 800-meter run to ultimately score the gold. With his feat, Sara has claimed a win that eluded us since the legendary Elma Muros achieved it in 2001, almost 2 decades later. We can once again proudly claim that the toughest woman in Asia is a Filipina. Can you imagine, Mr. President? The last winner of this event that was a Filipina was the great Elma Muros. Both Christine and Sara had to do the difficult thing of leaving their families in Bukidnon for a long while in order to put the necessary training for the SEA Games. Their sacrifice, suffice to say, has paid off immensely. We in Bukidnon could not be more proud of them, and they have put our beloved province on the map, and they have brought great pride to the nation. For all this, Mr. President, it's my honor to commend Christine and Sara, who are a testament to the astounding capabilities of an empowered Filipina. Tama ba, Secretary? Yes. So with that, Mr. President, I move to close the period of sponsorship, and there are no amendments, Mr. President, and no interpolators, so we move, Mr. President, with the permission of the body, to adopt proposed Senate Resolution number 245 and 246.
Any objection? Hearing none. PS Resolution 245, taking into consideration Senate Resolution 246, is hereby adopted.
Mr. President, for the record as well, could we make all members of the Senate as co-sponsor and co-author of the measure?
We make that on record.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before we pause to recognize them and give them the resolutions, I would like to move forward with the other resolutions on the SEA Games athletes so that we can pause quickly and have a photo with all of them together.
Yes, you may do so.
Mr. President, I move that with the permission of the body that we consider Senate Resolution number 281. I so move.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration is in order.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title?
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
PS Resolution number 281, resolution congratulating and commending the medalists from the city of Valenzuela at the 30th Southeast Asian Games.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, may we recognize the sponsor of the measure, Senator Win Gatchalian.
Thank you, Mr. Pre-
Former Mayor Sherwin Gatchalian of Valenzuela is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, good afternoon. I'm in high spirits as I stand before all of you this afternoon. Only 1 week has passed since the Philippines clinched the overall championship at the 30th Southeast Asian Games, but up to now, we are still elated with the historic win that our athletes delivered for our country. By the time our athletes have hauled 149 golds, 117 silvers, 121 bronze medals, we all knew how it felt to win as one. Mr. President, today I am proud to pay tribute to Valenzuela's athletes who took part in making history and showed our Southeast Asian neighbors that Filipino talent is truly world-class. Let us recognize my fellow kababayans from Valenzuela who are here with us this afternoon. 2 of them bagged gold medals. Mr. Fernando Jose Casares in triathlon, mixed relay, and Janelle Hayes Bataon in esports. 4 Valenzuelanos also clinched bronze medals. Noelito Jose Jr. of the Philippine fencing team. And coincidentally, Mr. President, he's also a Pio Valenzuela scholar. That is a very coveted scholarship program in Valenzuela. Miss Brandon Carly Aquino of the Sailing International, Mr. Brandon Kaylee Aquino of the Sailing International Men's Event. Baby Jessica Canabal of the Taekwondo Women's Team. And John Michael Amay Pasco of the Men's Beach Handball Team. Bilang isang mamayan at dating alkalde ng lungsod ng Valenzuela, lubos kong pinagmamalaki ang tagumpay ng aking mga kababayan sa nagdaan SEA Games. Commending our players from Valenzuela is not just an acknowledgement of their talent and triumph, but it also proved to us that hard work, determination, and love for sports have led them to greater heights. Hindi po biro, Mr. President, ang pinagdaanan nilang sakripisyo sa pagsasanay para lang mauwi ang medalya. Mas lalong hindi biro ang maging malayo sa kanilang mamahal sa buhay para lang mag-ensayo. Hindi lang po sila nagbibigay ng inspirasyon sa akin. Nagpapasalamat din po ako sa lahat ng mga taga-Valenzuela na taos-pusong nagbibigay ng suporta sa ating mga manlalaro. Our very own players receive an outpouring of well wishes and other forms of support from our local government officials to every kababayan on the street of Valenzuela. At sa kanilang pagwawagi, hindi lamang sila nag-uwi ng karangalan para sa kanilang sarili. Ang kanilang tagumpay ay tagumpay ng lungsod ng Valenzuela at ng ating bansa. Mr. President, our winning athletes remind us that it is time for us to write a new chapter in the history of sports development in our country. They inspire us to create a nurturing environment that will help them develop their talents and exceed their limits and achieve their dreams. I strongly believe that the greatest honor we can give them is to boost sports development in our country so that athletes like them can reach their full potential and be well equipped for the world stage. Let us both maintain and sustain the enthusiasm and energy we showed at the Southeast Asian Games and support the next generation of Filipino athletes. Looking forward to the new year, I am very excited on our proposed Philippine High School for Sports that will help us develop more world-class Filipino athletes. It is my dream to see more young Valenzuelanos develop their talents and become global athletes. Sa mga kapwa kong Valenzuelano na nagdala ng karangalan sa aming mahal na lungsod at sa buong bansa, alam kong malayo pa ang inyong mararating upang makapag-uwi ng mas marami pang karangalan. Sa pagpapatuloy ng iyong paglalakbay, makakaasa kayo na katuwang po ninyo ako. Mr. President, dear colleagues, I urge you to join me in congratulating and commending our Southeast Asian Games medalists from the city of Valenzuela who brought honor and pride to our country. Mabuhay ang mga atletang Pinoy, mabuhay ang mga manlalaro ng Valenzuela. Maraming salamat po.
Majority Leader.
we recognize as well, Mr. President, Senator Bato de la Rosa, Mr. President.
Senator Ronald Della Rosa is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to present my short manifestation on the same topic, the performance of our athletes in the last SEA Games. Mr. President, I join my colleagues in this August chamber in commending all our Filipino athletes who have actively and excellently participated in the recent Southeast Asian Games. Not only did they reap gold, silver, and bronze medals for our country, but they also won the hearts of other SEA Games competitors and the whole world for demonstrating the highest degree of sportsmanship, discipline, and supreme distinction of what Filipino athletes are made of. Being a sports person myself, I feel the joy and the triumph of our local athletes whose hours of tireless practice and indefatigable sacrifices paved the way to success. I was once a varsity player of the Philippine Military Academy. I was into boxing, judo, and wrestling during my PMA days, and almost made it to the national team in wrestling during the Gintong Alay days of Michael Keon. Being into sports not only enhances the physical stamina and well-being of an individual, but likewise nurtures one's emotional and mental discipline in achieving the personal goal of excelling in one's chosen sports. Maraming salamat sa ating mga atleta na naging magandang huwaran sa ating mga kabataan na magtuon ng panahon sa sports. Saludo ko sa ating mga atletang Pilipino. Salamat sa karangalang ipinagkaloob nyo sa ating bansa at sa mamayang Pilipino. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. And the whole Republic will not forget how Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa taught us how to dance Manila in the opening day. Manila, Manila. Magaling
Oh, so
sumayaw
that was a dance.
That's the dance, Mr.
I
President.
thought
Maybe
he
ask
was-
him to present it again, Mr. President.
I thought he was exercising.
Example na nga po, sir. Mr. President, no other member wishes to sponsor, and there are no amendments as well as interpolators, Mr. President. I move that we, with the permission of the body, adopt proposed resolution number 281. I so move, Mr. President. But before we do that, if we ask the sponsor, if all of us in the Senate can be made co-sponsor and co-author of the measure.
With
No
the
objection.
permission of Senator Gatchalian, yes.
Lahat tayo, author. Yes, Mr. President.
All right, we place that on record. And so the motion is to adopt
Yes.
PS Resolution 281. Any objection? Hearing none. Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I ask for a 1-minute suspension to give the resolutions of congratulations to our medalists?
All right, the session is suspended.
Yung nga, nakita ko, pogi ah. Pogi siya. Is he there? I'm supposed to greet somebody also, mayor of, anong town yung mayor? Sabi ko, pag may flashlight competition, sali ka.
Grade 1, 2, 3.
that survey.
Mahuli na daw si Sen Lito. Mamaya na daw siya.
Masunod yun sa akin. Sponsorship mo.
Ano siya sponsor? Gusto siya lang ihangin. Ready to issue, Mr. President?
Session resumed.
Mr. President, I know in the calendar today, in the agenda, we marked the Human Security Act as #1 priority.
Yes.
But my Assistant Majority Leader has been badgering me today if he can just sponsor his speech for 3 pages only, 3 pages, which Senator Lacson graciously acceded to allow the sponsorship of our good gentleman from Bulacan. Therefore, Mr. President, I move to transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to the calendar of special orders, Senate Bill number 1233. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, so transferred.
Mr. President, with the consent of our Senate and our body and our colleagues, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1233.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is in order.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Senate Bill number 1233, an act expanding the use of the Legal Assistance Fund, amending for the purpose Section 26 of Republic Act number 8042 as amended, otherwise known as the Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipinos Act of 1995.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Joel Villanueva, to sponsor the measure.
Senator Joey Villanueva is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Maganda at mapagpalang hapon po sa ating lahat. Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues, it is my honor as Chairperson of the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development to sponsor Senate Bill number 1233 under Committee Report number 30, or an act expanding the use of the Legal Assistance Fund, amending for the purpose Section 26 of Republic Act number 8042 as amended, otherwise known as the Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipinos Act. Ginoong Pangulo, 3 buwan na po ang nakararaan ng magbaba ng hatol ang Syrian District Criminal Court na guilty sa kasong murder si Mauna Ali Hasun, ang employer ng kababayan nating inabuso, pinaslang at itinago sa loob ng freezer sa isang inabandonang apartment sa Kuwait na si Joanna de Mafilis. Halos 3 taon pong paghihintay mula nang una nating mabalitaan ang pagkawala ni Joanna de Mafilis noong 2017. Habang nakikipaglaban para sa hustisya ang kanyang mga pamilya at mahal sa buhay ang ating gobyerno, isang kababayan din natin ang kinidnap at ginahasa naman noong ika-4 ng Hunyo 2019 ng isang Kuwaiti police officer na si Fayed Nasar Hamad Alajmi. Nangyari po ito pagdating sa Kuwait ng ating kababayan para magtrabaho bilang household service worker. 2 linggo matapos ang insidenteng ito, isang kababayan naman nating biktima ng illegal recruitment at human trafficking ang namatay sa Morocco matapos siyang tumalon, di umano mula sa 3 palapag ng tinitirhang apartment matapos daw ang mainit ng pakikipagtalo sa kanyang employer noong ika-22 ng Hunyo 2019. Ang 3 pangyayaring ito ay napakaliit na porsyento lamang ng hindi po mabilang na kaso ng pang-aabuso sa ating mga OFWs. Noong ika-6 lang ng Oktubre, 158 Pilipino mula sa United Arab Emirates na biktima ng illegal recruitment at human trafficking ang sapilitan ding umuwi at pinauwi dito sa ating bansa. Bukod po sa physical abuse, marami rin po sa ating mga kababayan ang nakaranas ng psychological abuse. Kaya nga po isinulong at ipinasa natin noong nakaraang Kongreso ang Social Welfare Attaché Law. Hindi pagbabayad ng tamang sweldo o delayed na pagbayad ng sweldo. Contract alteration tulad ng nangyari po sa mga Pinoy truck driver sa Poland at Germany at sa iba pang lugar sa Europa. Maging sa atin pong opisina, Ginoong Pangulo, halos araw-araw po nakakatanggap tayo ng mga liham, sulat, email mula sa mga OFW sa iba't ibang panig ng mundo. Humihingi po ng tulong upang ma-rescue sila sa kanilang mga mapang-aping employers o upang matulungan sila sa mga kasong nasasangkutan nila bilang nila sa ibang bansa. Kaya nga po, Ginoong Pangulo, kailangan po natin ng makabuluhang reforma sa ating batas upang paigtingin pa ang proteksyon para sa ating mga bagong bayani, para sa ating mga OFWs. Gayon din ang mga programang magpapatingkad ng pagkalinga ng gobyerno sa kanila. This is in line with the 1987 Constitution, Mr. President, which decrees the full protection of labor, both local and overseas, as a primary social economic force. To be sure, however, full protection of labor under the Constitution does not simply mean and end at mere provision by the state of work and equal employment opportunities for its workforce. Full protection of labor more significantly implies a continuing positive duty on the part of the Senate to ensure that the rights of its workers are at all times protected and their welfare promoted and improved at every chance possible. According to the Department of Labor and Employment, as of June 2019, there are approximately 8,985,377 overseas Filipinos abroad, 3,352,188 of which are Filipino migrant workers. Meanwhile, according to the Department of Foreign Affairs, the number of overseas Filipinos who have sought the help of the DFA for legal assistance has been on a steady increase. In 2018, there are approximately 3,735 overseas Filipinos who have been assisted by the DFA through the Legal Assistance Fund. Meanwhile, as of August 31, 2019, approximately 4,116 have already benefited from the Legal Assistance Fund. These data reflect not only the practical utility of the Legal Assistance Fund and its advantages, but also, and more importantly, Mr. President, the existence of the actual need for immediate and prompt legal assistance to the thousands of migrant workers and Filipinos abroad. Mr. President, it is in this context that I am sponsoring Senate Bill number 1233 under Committee Report number 30, which aims to amend Section 26 of the Migrant Workers Act and aims to achieve the following. First, this measure seeks to strengthen and expand the use of the Legal Assistance Fund to include bonds required not just by the courts but also by other agencies or tribunal. The law's application, thus, is not only limited to payment of bonds for purposes of securing provisional liberties, but also to such other bonds required by courts, tribunals, or government agencies. Second, the proposed amendment to Section 26 to the Migrant Workers Act authorizes our foreign posts to engage the services of paralegals with special knowledge and familiarity with the language, laws, rules, procedures, customs, and traditions of the foreign country. Mr. President, this allows our foreign posts to immediately provide, at the very least, such basic or first aid legal services that migrant workers and overseas Filipinos in distress may need. The aim is to advance and improve not only the quality, but also the promptness of the delivery of these services to our migrant workers and overseas Filipinos. Third, the amendments mandate in no uncertain terms that legal support and the Legal Assistance Fund shall immediately and at all times be made available to distressed migrant workers and Filipinos abroad. It further clarifies that such assistance shall be given from the moment the case is initiated or the proceeding is commenced until its termination, promulgation, and execution. This assistance extends further to all appeals taken on these cases, thereby guaranteeing full and complete support to distressed Filipino overseas. Lastly, Mr. President, the measure clarifies that the implementing rules and regulations of the Act may authorize the Secretary of Foreign Affairs to delegate the authority to approve an expenditure chargeable to the fund to the head of post, subject, of course, to existing rules and regulations of the Commission on Audit. Mr. President, this is to address the concern raised during our technical working group discussions that actions on request for legal assistance by some OFWs are delayed because of the bureaucratic approval process in availing of the fund. Accordingly, before a legal expense can be charged to the fund, an approval from the main office of the Department of Foreign Affairs is still needed, which sometimes may be detrimental to the welfare, not to mention mental health of migrant workers and overseas Filipinos in distress. Therefore, Mr. President, we urge our esteemed colleagues to rally behind this noble effort to further strengthen the protection afforded by the state to our migrant workers and overseas Filipinos. The risks and vulnerabilities suffered by our countrymen overseas cannot be overemphasized. Indeed, the proposed amendments to the Migrant Workers Act are a testament to the state's continuing effort to give true meaning to the constitutional edict of giving full protection to our migrant workers and distressed overseas Filipinos. As the eminent Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Abraham Sarmiento, once observed, it is bad enough that the country has to send its sons and daughters to strange lands because it cannot satisfy their employment needs at home. Under these circumstances, the government is duty-bound to ensure that our toiling expatriates have adequate protection, personally and economically, while away from home. It is thus just fitting and appropriate and in line with the celebration of the month of overseas Filipinos that this chamber fully and immediately approve Senate Bill 1233 under Committee Report number 30. Before I end my speech, Mr. President, please allow me to reiterate our thanks and appreciation to all our colleagues for their interest and support to this measure, most especially our co-authors, Senators Nancy Binay and Senator Bato de la Rosa, and the members of the Committee on Labor who actively participated during the deliberations of this bill. Maraming salamat po at muli pagpalain tayong lahat ng ating Panginoong Diyos.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. I believe also two sponsors, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa, as well as Ma'am Nancy Binay, would like to insert to the records their sponsorship speeches.
All right, the co-sponsorship speeches of Senators De La Rosa, Binay, and Bangarra will be inserted into the records.
And Mr. President, the request from our colleagues, Senator Bangarra would like to be made co-author, as well as Senator Grace Poe and myself, as well as Senator Manny Pacquiao. If with the permission of the body, Mr. President, all members
Chilean and Pimentel also. All right. And those present.
Those present here, Mr. President,
All
be
right.
made co-sponsor.
So recorded.
co-author. Thank you, Mr. President. To allow our colleagues to study the measure further, I move to suspend consideration of the measure.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration is suspended.
We have in the gallery also, Mr. President, Mayor Haron Omar of Magsaysay, Llano del Norte is here with us and his party.
Welcome to the Senate.
Mr. President, we go back to our previous schedule. With that, I move that we consider, Mr. President, Senate Bill number 1083 and the committee report number 9.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is in order.
May we recognize the distinguished senator from Cavite, Senator Panfilo M. Lacson, and to interpolate our distinguished minority floor leader, Senator Franklin M. Drilon.
The gentleman from Cavite, Chairman of the Committee on National Defense and Security, Senator Ping Lacson, is recognized. And to interpolate, the minority leader, Senator Frank Drilon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, given the importance of this measure, I do hope that I can attract the attention of our colleagues to the for the period of interpolation where we will seek to clarify certain issues. Thank you, Mr. President. Just a manifestation record. Mr. President, will the gentleman from Cavite, sponsor of the measure, yield the floor to a few questions?
To the distinguished minority leader, one of the acknowledged better minds in this chamber, an intervention coming from you to enhance this measure is very much appreciated. So willingly, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We wish to assure the good sponsor that the questions we will raise here and the amendments that we will submit later on the period of amendments are aimed to make the provisions clear, remove the ambiguities both in substance and procedure, to make the law and its implementation and prosecution more effective. It is in this context that we are availing of the spirit of interpolation in order that we can submit to the good sponsor our views as to how to improve the bill so that the prosecution arm and the law enforcement agencies of this government can be more effective in their task to secure our borders and our national security. So to start with, Mr. President, the gentleman is fully familiar with the concept of and principle of civilian supremacy in our Constitution.
That is an assurance, Mr. President.
Yes, it is found in Article 2, Declaration of Principles, Section 3 of our Constitution, which says, and I quote, "Civilian authority is at all times supreme over the military. The armed forces of the Philippines is the protector of the people and the state. Its goal is to secure the sovereignty of the state and the integrity of national security." These are the very clear terms of our Constitution and reiterates the principle of civilian supremacy. We note, Mr. President, that the bill proposed gives an expansive role to our military establishment in the fight against terrorism. Just to give a few examples of amendments in the proposed measure, which gives an expansive role to our armed forces, would be: one, the military is given the authority to undertake surveillance activities upon the order of the Court of Appeals. The military establishment can also apply with the Court of Appeals to compel communication service providers and internet service providers to produce customer information and identification records. The military can also apply for an order to undertake surveillance activities. The military can execute a joint affidavit in connection with the deposit of intercepted and recorded communications with the issuing court. The military is also given can also take into custody a person charged with or suspected of committing any terrorist act or any attempt or conspiracy to commit terrorist acts, or any member of the proscribed group of persons, organizations, or association without need of judicial warrant of arrest and subject to certain conditions. The Armed Forces of the Philippines is also may also conduct, upon authority of the court, examination of bank records. This expansive role of the military is found in various sections of the proposed measure. Our question, Mr. President, is, given this role given by the bill, if it becomes law, to the military, does this impinge on the principle of civilian supremacy enshrined in our 87 Constitution?
Definitely not, Mr. President, because the primary function of law enforcement rests on the police organization. The military will play a supportive role to assist our police officials in the implementation of this proposed measure.
Okay, very good. In other words, the primacy of the PNP is recognized under the proposed measure, notwithstanding the expansive role given to the armed forces.
That is correct, Mr. President. In the performance of law enforcement functions, it is still the PNP and the NBI that will play the lead role. But of course, in some areas where terrorism is, shall we say, abundant in its activities, then and the military presence is needed, then they are also allowed to exercise or to secure judicial authorization in monitoring or conducting surveillance against the terrorist groups or terrorist individuals, Mr. President.
Mr. President, shouldn't we give the armed forces of the Philippines more, the armed forces of the Philippines a more extensive role where the situation or the acts constitutes a serious threat to national security?
That is correct, Mr. President, but the primacy of the civilian authority is still there. Because if they conduct surveillance, they still need to get judicial authorization from the civilian court. In this case, in our proposal, not from an ordinary regional trial court, but from the Court of Appeals, Mr. President.
Yes, that is the present law. What we are really saying, Mr. President, is that where it involves a suppression of insurgency and other serious threats to our national security, I think it should be accepted that the military should play a bigger role than, and maybe even take a lead. Let me cite to the good gentleman Section 17 of Republic Act 6975. It says under Section 12, relationship of the Department of Interior and Local Governments with the Department of National Defense. The Department of Interior and Local Government shall be relieved of the primary responsibility on matters involving suppression of insurgency and other serious threats to national security. And it goes on further, the Philippine National Police, through information gathering and performance of ordinary police functions, support the armed forces of the Philippines on matters involving suppression of insurgency, except where the President shall call on the PNP to support the AFP in combat operations. In other words, Mr. President, what we're saying is, under our present law and practice, the AFP is given a lead role even where on matters involving national security. Is that a correct proposition, Mr. President?
Well, that is a correct, that is impression under 6975. That is correct, Mr. President. But the military operate in those areas where, mostly in the rural areas, where insurgency is so prevalent that the police cannot alone handle the situation or the security threat, Mr. President. But by and large, generally speaking, the armed forces of the Philippines will be in charge of external threats, while internal threats are taken care of by the Philippine National Police.
We are raising this question, Mr. President, because whether terrorism or whether the armed forces or the police would have jurisdiction over an act, an offense, would depend really on the purpose for which the act is being committed. Where it threatens national security, it is our submission that this is within the purview of a terrorist activity, which should be within the purview of which should be within the jurisdiction and primary responsibility of the armed forces, as right now defined under our existing laws.
As I said, if it involves external threats, then the armed forces of the Philippines takes the lead role. But as far as internal threats, and in this case, terrorism is a complex, it is a rather complex situation, Mr. President, because we can consider acts of terrorism as borderless crimes because
Yes.
a terroristic act may be committed outside of our jurisdiction, and precisely we intended to make this law proactive, the application of the law proactive, to prevent any massive damage on our infrastructure, on the social, political, even economic structure of the country, Mr. President.
So just to be clear, and it should be spread on the record, that in the view of the sponsor, the Philippine National Police has the primary obligation to suppress terrorism, primary obligation and duty, and the AFP will play a secondary role, and only in those instances which are specified in the proposed bill and proposed
That is
law.
correct, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, so let us go to some specific issues in the bill, Mr. President. Let's go to Section 4, Mr. President. First, a comment. I believe that the noun terrorism as a description of the crime is better than terrorist acts, Mr. President. So at the appropriate time, maybe we can retain the noun terrorism to describe the offense rather than terrorist acts. In any case, that will come later on, Mr. President. I'm just submitting that this early for the
Yes.
consideration of the good gentleman. Now, on Section 4, Section 4 provides, any person who commits any of the following unlawful acts in or outside the Philippines, regardless of its stage of execution, is guilty of terrorism. This is, first, the extraterritoriality principle because of the phrase in or outside the Philippines. The present law, Mr. President, clearly indicates when the extraterritoriality will apply. And in those instances, it is very clear that the nexus of the offense or an element of the offense takes place within the boundaries of the Philippines or concerns Filipinos or an establishment recognized as part of the Philippine territory. In other words, it is not simply because a terrorist act was committed, but because of the fact that it concerns the Philippines. Let me read for
That is
the
not quite accurate, Mr. President.
Sorry?
Even a foreigner that comes to the Philippines or a foreign terrorist, that's why we have dedicated one section defining a foreign terrorist.
Yes,
Because
Mr.
even if he's not a Filipino and he commits terrorism, acts of terrorism abroad, and he attempts to come to the Philippines, then he may be put under the jurisdiction of this proposed measure.
No, well, firstly, Mr. President, I am just talking about the present law.
Present
The
law. Sorry,
present
Mr.
law.
President.
Yes. The present law under Section 58 defines the principle when extraterritoriality will apply. First, when the person who commit crimes defined as punished under this act within the territorial domain of the Philippines, or where the individual persons, although physically outside the territory of the Philippines, commit or plot or conspire to commit any of the offenses punished by this act inside the territorial limits of the Philippines. Third persons who, although outside the territorial limits of the Philippines, commit any of the said crimes on board a Philippine ship. And then when the person, although outside of the territorial boundaries of the Philippines, commits crimes against a Philippine citizen. And 6, the individuals who, while physically outside the territorial jurisdiction of the Philippines, commit said crimes directly against the Philippine government. So if you will note, Mr. President, in the present law, there is always a relation to the security of the Philippines, or the security of its national territory, or the security of a Filipino citizen.
That is correct, Mr. President.
Now, is there a change in that concept? Because it would appear that under under Section 4, that there is no longer a need for a nexus in the Philippines.
That's still the principle applied under the proposed measure, Mr. President. It is the interest or the safety or security of the Philippines, of the country, and any Filipino residing in this country, Mr.
Yes,
President.
I agree with that, Mr. President. That is when the principle of extraterritoriality clearly applies. So at the appropriate time, would the good gentleman agree to maybe reinstate those instances when extraterritoriality applies, and the important factor is that there must be an element that, or the objective must involve a Philippine issue, or a Philippine national, a Philippine territory, etc.
Definitely, Mr. President.
Yes,
We will maintain that same principle.
Yes. Okay, so because the way it is phrased here, Mr. President, right now, the way the bill is phrased, especially in the case of foreign terrorists,
Yes.
who is punished when they cross borders, that's found in the bill. When they go from one country to the other with a purpose of committing terrorist act, he is punishable by life imprisonment by Philippine courts.
Under the proposed measure.
Yes,
Mr.
under the
President.
proposed measure. So that theoretically, if a Malaysian terrorist
Will travel to the Philippines.
will travel to Indonesia, or will travel to Indonesia to commit acts of terrorism in Indonesia, he can be punished under the definition of a foreign terrorist under the law.
Theoretically, yes, Mr. President. But the long arm of the law, the Philippine law, cannot overreach to a country like Indonesia or Malaysia, because when they are here, then we acquire jurisdiction. In the first place, even if we have the capability to arrest them in Indonesia, we cannot apply the Philippine law, this proposed measure, in Indonesia.
All right.
But if they attempt to come here, even if they committed the crime of terrorism in Indonesia or Malaysia or elsewhere, then they can be punished, and may be punished with maximum penalty of life imprisonment without the benefit of parole, Mr. President.
Okay, let me clarify that, Mr. President.
What we are trying to avoid here is to make the Philippines a safe haven for terrorists. If you remember, the Mauti fighters, they were influenced by foreign nationals, foreign terrorists. We don't want that to happen
Right.
again in the Philippines.
But
Mr.
didn't they commit a punishable offense while in Philippine territory? For example, if they intended to commit terrorist acts in the Philippines, yes, they can be punished.
Yes, they can be punished.
But if there is no such act committed, and no overt act is committed in the Philippines, I think it's a little difficult to accept that we will punish them. Maybe we should deport them or extradite them to the country where the offense was committed. But I don't think it is a correct legal principle that they should be punished in the Philippines because
Or
they
acts
did that
committed in another country.
for acts done in another country which does not affect the Philippines at all.
But if they attempt to come here, then,
I'm sorry,
as I
sir?
said, if they attempt to come here,
Yes.
once they are here, they may be punished under this proposed measure. Precisely, we are attempting to, or we intend to expand the coverage of terrorist acts, Mr. President. Even if the terrorist act was committed outside of our jurisdiction, once they attempt to come here, and we have the sufficient evidence to show that he is a terrorist, a foreign terrorist, that is coming to the Philippines, then by all means, the proposed measure will be given the authority to arrest and punish. But of course, it depends on the intent and purpose of coming here.
Yes,
If
if
his
they just
intent-
come here as to go to Boracay and
If he's a
swim.
foreign terrorist,
Yes, I mean theoretically,
yes,
huh?
yes, he can still be covered by the proposed, under the proposed measure.
That's a little difficult to accept, Mr. President. Are we saying that terrorism is a continuing offense so that a foreign terrorist who crosses the border, he has no intention whatsoever of doing anything, of violating Philippine law, of committing any act of terrorism? There is no evidence. Will he be subject to life imprisonment here?
Under the territoriality principle, yes, Mr. President.
No, well, the way it is
If he's
defined.
here, if he goes to Boracay on R&R,
Yes,
and he is here in our country, but he is a foreign terrorist
yes.
who has committed acts of terrorism abroad,
Yes.
then he should be covered under the proposed measure, Mr. President, under
well,
the principle of territoriality.
There is no nexus, then there is no point of contact for the Philippines. Why should we punish him with life imprisonment?
Well,
There is no point of contact. Yeah, may I yield the floor to Senator
President.
Tolentino, who wants to
President.
contribute?
Mr. President,
Senator Tolentino,
with the
recognized.
permission of the good sponsor and the minority leader, perhaps I would just like to interject an item as the minority leader interjected Article 2 of the revised penal code, which is correct. The items mentioned therein, the provisions should commit an offense while in a Philippine ship, etc., among others. But perhaps the good sponsor is now referring to a new customary international law, which is generally accepted now, Mr. President. And I am now referring to the universality principle, Mr. President. And I'd like to quote this, and probably as part of this parliamentary conversation, this would clarify what the good sponsor is saying, that indeed, even without the nexus being posited by the good minority leader, there is indeed jurisdiction. And I quote, Mr. President, a universal jurisdiction would apply, and it refers to an idea that a national court may prosecute individuals for serious crimes against international law, such as crimes against humanity, war crimes, genocide, torture, terrorism, based on the principle that such crimes harm the international community. I heard of a crime committed in Indonesia without a connection to Philippine penal laws or international order itself, which individual states may also protect, Mr. President. Generally, universal jurisdiction is invoked when other traditional bases of criminal jurisdictions are not available. For example, the defendant is not a national of the state. The defendant did not commit a crime in that state's territory or against its nationals, or the state's own national interests are not adversely affected, Mr. President. The norm suggests that states are obligated to intervene diplomatically or even to the extreme militarily to prevent the commission of such crimes, Mr. President. That's probably the missing link that the good minority leader is trying to find out. Where is the nexus? Where is the connection? The connection lies in the disruption of the general peace, of the general international legal order when someone commits a crime, whether it is within the territory or outside the territory of the Philippines by a foreign national, by a Filipino, if it affects such crimes such as terrorism, Mr. President. I'm quoting this. This will be part of the parliamentary exchange when probably the good sponsor would be in the period of individual amendment. I just retorted this because the good minority leader was looking for a nexus or a legal connection. So the umbilical cord, so to speak, is found in the universality principle which I have just stated, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. What the gentleman from Cavite has pointed out is the definition of universal jurisdiction. Now, the Institute of International Law in its resolution on universal jurisdiction provides that, and I would like to quote, universal jurisdiction in criminal matters as an additional ground of jurisdiction means the competence of a state to prosecute alleged offenders and to punish them if convicted, irrespective of the place of commission of the crime and regardless of any link, nexus, of active or passive nationality or other grounds of jurisdiction recognized by international law. That is what he just pointed out, and rightly so, Mr. President. Because in our case, we are invoking the extrajudicial application, provided that this laws could be justified by one of the recognized principles. Number one, active nationality principle, protective principle, the passive principle, and the universality principle under international law, Mr. President.
Well, okay, Mr. President. The present revised penal code very clearly outlines when extraterritoriality can be invoked. Let me read Article 2. Let me read Article 2. Application of its provisions. Except as provided in treaties or laws of preferential application, the provisions of this code shall be enforced not only within the Philippine archipelago, including its environment and interior waters and maritime zone, but also outside the Philippines, among those who, number 5, should commit any of the crimes against national security and the law of nations. What are the crimes against national security? Treason, conspiracy and proposal to commit treason, misprision of treason, and espionage. And crimes against the law of nations include inciting to war or giving motives for reprisals, violation of neutrality, correspondence with the hostile country, flight to enemy's territory, piracy in general, and mutiny in the high seas or in Philippine waters. In the case of People versus Lalo and Sarao, Lolo and Sarao, decided by the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court held that the piracy is not a crime against any particular state, but against all mankind. That is why even not one of the elements where there is no point of contact in the Philippines, they are punished because by tradition and by practice, the piracy is a crime against humanity. But if you will notice, Mr. President, the extraterritoriality is an exception to the general rule.
That is correct, Mr. President.
And therefore, that exception must be clearly justified because it can even, a very broad and loose application of extraterritoriality can result in many difficult legal questions to resolve. And in this particular case, the gentleman is saying that even if there is no point of contact in the Philippines, the terrorist can be imprisoned for life in the Philippines. And Mr. President, looking at this proposed measure, somewhere here is a definition that when a foreign terrorist crosses international borders, not even going to the Philippines, he can be punished by life imprisonment in the Philippines.
That is correct, Mr. President. But
In other words, if a foreign terrorist would move from one country to the other abroad, sowing terrorist acts in foreign countries and has nothing to do with the Philippines, it is still a crime under Philippine law.
as clearly pointed out by Senator Tolentino, Mr. President, we are now applying the definition of universal jurisdiction because the provision under the revised penal code is very limiting, and that's the reason why we included the phrase in or outside of the Philippines. During the committee hearing, Mr. President, last August 13, General Monteagudo, the NICA Director General, tama ba yun? Director General ka ba? Raised one problem that the law must address. No? Kaya nga isiningit natin dito to, Mr. President, which is, what do we do to a Filipino who joined the ISIS, for example, this is theoretical, abroad and is planning to come back here sa Pilipinas, and in the same manner, we're also faced with the parallel question of what we should do with foreigners who commit terrorist acts abroad and then come to the Philippines to evade prosecution in the place where they committed their terrorist acts. Kaya medyo in-expand nga natin na to cover foreign terrorists. And even those who committed terroristic acts abroad may be covered or may be punished under the proposed measure, Mr. President.
Well, in our submission, Mr. President, is that there are remedies available in those instances other than life imprisonment. I am not saying that you should be helpless, but we are saying, Mr. President, that to punish that person with life imprisonment when he had absolutely no intention to violate the integrity of the national territory or the national sovereignty or the security of the Philippines, we should impose life imprisonment because, Mr. President, in case of conflict of laws, for example, in order that it applies, there must be a point of contact in one country. That's our problem, and with a very broad and, to our mind, overarching jurisdiction. I'm sorry, Mr. President, but my knowledge, my little knowledge of the law, would not accept the proposition that he who had nothing to do with the Philippines, not plotting against the Philippines, not doing act which would undermine our national security, who comes here after, who even if he does not come here. Wait. Because,
Yes,
Mr. Sponsor, your bill would punish crossing borders abroad in the way it is phrased now. A foreign terrorist.
Hindi applicable.
Yes, the foreign
This
terrorist.
won't apply, Mr. President, even if, while the general principle that would apply is that if a foreign terrorist commits the crime abroad and he does not come to the Philippines, then we cannot really reach him, Mr. President. We cannot acquire jurisdiction. But under the proposed measure, he can be punished once he attempts to come to the Philippines, even on R&R.
Yeah,
That is the...
Mr. President, to our mind, those are two different issues. The matter of ability to enforce the law and the law itself. Let me, Mr. President, cite to the good gentleman, page 10, section 10 of the proposed measure. And let me read it. And we invite the gentleman to this. It says, section 10,
Yeah.
foreign terrorists.
Yes.
The following acts are unlawful and shall be punished with the penalty of life imprisonment without the benefit of parole or the benefits of Republic Act 10592. Letter A, for any person to travel or attempt to travel to a state other than his or her state of residence or nationality for the purpose of perpetrating, planning, or preparing for, or participating in terrorist acts and or providing or receiving terrorist training. Here, Mr. President, it is very clear that a foreign terrorist who is planning to commit such acts abroad, nothing to do with the Philippines, the fact that he crosses borders would make him liable for life imprisonment in the Philippines.
Not for crossing borders, but for planning a terrorist act in any country outside the
No.
of his area of residence, Mr. President.
Well, Mr. President, maybe we should clarify that because on line 6 on page 10,
This A.
Letter A.
Yes.
for a person, in other words, the following acts are unlawful and is punished by life imprisonment. For any person to travel or attempt to travel to a state other than his or her state of residence or nationality for the purpose of perpetrating, planning, or preparing for, or participating in terrorist acts, providing or receiving terrorist training. Here, Mr. President, we are punishing somebody who travels with,
No, Mr. President. We're punishing his purpose of perpetrating, planning, or preparing for, or participating in terrorist acts, or providing for, or receiving terrorist training, etc., etc.
No, Mr. President.
Not the act of traveling, Mr.
No,
President.
Mr. President. Well, if that is the intention, first of all, that is not how it is written. Because what is punished is who is traveling or attempting for purposes of traveling or attempting to travel to a state other than his or her state of residence for purposes of. So it is the act of traveling which is punished if the act of traveling is for the purpose of committing
The act of
terrorism.
traveling per se will not be punishable.
Well, if
But
it's
if
for
he
the,
travels for the purpose of committing the following acts as enumerated, then that is the one we're punishing, Mr. President.
and that act has nothing to do with the Philippines.
Even if it's nothing to do with the Philippines, yes, Mr. President. Because that's why we are applying the universal
Shouldn't-
definition or definition of universal jurisdiction,
Yeah.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Let me point out, Mr. President.
okay.
The basis for this is a UN Security Council Resolution 2178 in 2014. It says, it calls upon all member states in accordance with their obligations under international law to cooperate in efforts to address the threat posed by foreign terrorist fighters, including by preventing the radicalization to terrorism and recruitment of foreign terrorist fighters, including children, preventing foreign terrorist fighters from crossing their borders, disrupting and preventing financial support to foreign terrorist fighters, and developing and implementing prosecution, rehabilitation, and reintegration strategies for returning foreign terrorist fighters, Mr. President. That is the basis of this provision, Mr. President.
Yes, I'm sorry, but I...
It is
did not apprehend-
qualified by the purpose. Traveling per se is not punishable, Mr.
Okay.
President.
It is traveling for the purpose,
For the purpose.
right? But what is punished is the traveling.
No. The purpose
Yes.
of committing such acts, yun po yung pinaparusahan. Not the traveling.
Okay. Well,
The
anyway,
traveling is incidental to the purpose of committing the acts as enumerated.
all right. Anyway, may we have a copy of what the gentleman just read, Mr. President?
This one?
Yes,
sir,
sir.
Mr. President. If the person does not have the purpose as enumerated and he keeps on traveling, we won't mind him, Mr. President. He can travel for all he cares. But if he travels for the purpose of committing the acts as enumerated, then that's the act that we are punishing, Mr. President.
the gentleman is interpreting the call on member states to comply, to the call on member states to cooperate in efforts to address the threat posed by foreign terrorists by punishing the foreign terrorists with life imprisonment.
Mr. President, pwede natin pag-usapan kung ang issue rito, yung penalty.
Okay.
Pwede natin i-negotiate yan, Mr. President. If the point being raised by the distinguished minority leader is bakit pareho ng penalty doon sa actual commission of the terrorist acts dito sa traveling for the purpose of committing some acts as enumerated, then we can, I'm amenable to some amendments in this regard, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President, but also the fact that he travels from, say, in my example, from Malaysia to Indonesia. He, for the purpose of committing terrorist act in Indonesia, he is subject to the penalty of life imprisonment under Philippine law.
Understood, Mr. President.
Yes,
Understood.
that's a little difficult for you
Harsh.
to accept as
That's a little
lawyer.
harsh.
Yeah. So, all right, Mr. President. Now, under Section 4 also, it enumerates the acts which are considered unlawful, going beyond now the territorial issue, extraterritorial issue. The following acts which are considered unlawful. And it enumerates under page 6 the unlawful acts that are punishable. What I note significant here is on page 7, line 4, threat to commit any of the acts listed in A to D of this section. In other words, the mere threat is a threat is considered a punishable act. Would the gentleman sponsor confirm that, sir?
That is correct. Threat to commit any of the acts listed in paragraphs A to D of the section.
Right.
Meaning the previous paragraphs,
Yes.
Mr. President.
And,
But it is qualified again when the purpose of such act by its nature and context is to intimidate
Yes.
and so forth and so on.
We understand that, Mr. President. What we are referring to would be connecting that threat to commit any of the acts listed in paragraph A to D of the section where the purpose is so stated, with section 6 of the measure, which proposes to amend section 4 of the present law, when it punishes an attempt to commit. And let me read that, section 6. Section 6. Section 4 of the Act
Yes.
is hereby renumbered and amended to read as follows. Section 6. Attempt or conspiracy to commit terrorism,
A terrorist act.
a terrorist act. It says, any attempt to commit any of the acts defined and penalized under Section 4 of this act shall be imprisoned, shall be...
I see your point, Mr. President. You need not repeat your...
An attempt is the one to conduct who is guilty of an attempt is sentenced to the
Life
same extent,
imprisonment without parole.
without parole, etc. But apart from that, okay.
Hindi na. Babaguhin natin. Masyado mataas.
Yeah, but apart from that, sir, an attempt.
Ano niya is to lower the penalty. Okay lang.
Let me phrase my question clearly. Under Section 4, an attempt to commit any of the acts listed in paragraphs A to D a threat to commit is a crime. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr.
No.
President, under paragraph E, subparagraph E.
Yes.
Threat to commit any of the acts
Yes, is a
listed
crime.
in paragraph
Now,
A to D.
Also, an attempt to commit is also a crime
Under Section 6, Mr.
under Section
President.
6.
Yes.
Now, may we know what is an attempt to threaten? What is an attempted threat? Because that's what it means.
Independent yun, di ba? Yung attempt sa threat. Those are two independent. Those are two independent.
Huh?
It is not attempting to threaten.
Yeah, but that's how, okay. What is it?
Attempting to commit and threatening to commit. Those are two different. Anyway, if there is a problem in the language, Mr. President, then we're open to amendments along this line,
Yeah.
Mr. President.
Yeah, okay.
But what we have intended under these two provisions, Section 4 and Section 6, iba yung threatening to commit, iba yung attempting to commit. Hindi ito yung attempting to threaten.
Eh, yun,
Mr.
yun po ang
President.
labas eh, attempt to threaten.
Anyway, we're open to... Yeah. There's no perfect bill, Mr. President.
Sorry?
There's no perfect bill.
And there is no pride of authorship. Thank you, Mr. President, for that very welcome manifestation. Now, my reading of Section 4, particularly on line 9, when the act that is being punished is seriously destabilize or destroy the fundamental political, economic, or social structures of the country, or create public emergency, or undermine public safety. Can we be a bit more specific than such broad description?
Okay. One example is, if this hall is bombed, then
Sorry?
if the Senate session hall is bombed,
Yes.
right now as we debate on the measure, then they have successfully destabilized or seriously destabilized or destroyed the fundamental political, even the economic and social structures of the country, Mr. President. That's one example.
All right.
Imagine if this hall is bombed, then we're all gone, Mr. President.
Yes.
And the fundamental political structure has been destroyed, has been damaged, Mr. President. Yung parang nangyari sa designated survivor, Mr. President.
No, Mr. President, if you read the provision carefully, the purpose of it punishes the acts enumerated in A to E would be punished when the purpose of such act by its nature and context is to intimidate, put fear, so that it's not an actual bombing because that would be covered by other sections. It's just the purpose to induce government by force to do or to abstain from doing such an act. Our question here, Mr. President, what is the difference between this and the crime of grave threats under the revised penal code?
It's a purpose, Mr. President. A simple crime of grave threats without the purpose of sowing terrorism or committing terroristic acts, iba po yun. We're always bound by
Okay,
the
so,
intent
yeah, all right.
and purpose of
In
the
other
act.
words, it's a national security issue that makes it an act of terrorism, or not?
Not necessarily, Mr. President.
Yeah, but
As we defined it, as you mentioned earlier, ito yung, where's that, Section 4? Yung fundamental, eto. The purpose of such act by its nature and context is to intimidate, put in fear, force or induce the government or any international organization or the public to do or to abstain from doing any act or seriously destabilize or destroy the fundamental political, economic, or social structures of the country, Mr. President.
So, just in answer to my question, what distinguishes an ordinary crime of grave threat is the purpose of the offender in committing the crime.
That is correct, Mr.
That's
President.
correct? Yeah, okay. So that if it is for the purpose of intimidating, putting fear, force, or induce the government or any international organization as the public to do or abstain from doing an act that is considered a terrorist act, is that now, let me cite some specific example and try to draw the opinion from the good sponsor. Currently, we see a lot of rallies, protests in Hong Kong. That kind of protest has led to the collapse of the economy of Hong Kong practically. The anti-government protest has gone on for 6 months and has really harmed the economy. Now, assuming for the sake of argument that something similar happens here, would that act or the act of the protesters be considered as an act of terrorism? Because you are compelling the government to do something by force or intimidation?
No, Mr. President, it will not be included because the fundamental rights are always respected, even under this proposed measure, Mr. President.
Yes, but suppose, as in Hong Kong, there were instances of violence.
But we are always bound by the purpose, Mr. President. If the purpose is as
Yes,
enumerated,
yes.
then
Yes, the purpose in Hong Kong is to force the Hong Kong government
to allow them to exercise their fundamental rights, their freedom, even to choose their leaders, to exercise suffrage.
Yes.
If that's the purpose, it does not constitute an act of terrorism, Mr.
All right,
President.
Mr. President, good that we have on this on record, because this would guide us in attempting to make clearer the provisions here, so that it does not lead to an overarching or overreach in terms of the exposure to crimes of terrorism.
And we are grateful that you're pointing this out so we can further enlighten our colleagues that such acts, no matter how violent, if the purpose is not as enumerated under the proposed measure, then those are not acts of terrorism. For example, even if there's violence in the streets to call for freeing Senator De Lima, that is not terrorism, Mr. President. That is a legitimate exercise of the freedom to assemble, but they may be punished under a separate...
Under the revised penal code.
Under the revised penal code.
Yes. There is
Mr.
no
President.
question about that. Now, for example, again, I just want to cite examples in order to draw the intent of the author. If you recall, after the MOA AD was rejected as unconstitutional, there was some violence in Mindanao, and the objective was to very clearly to press for the passage of the Bangsamoro law, basic law. If this measure was law at that time, would the members of the Bangsamoro be liable for terrorism?
If the purpose does not fall under the provision as stated here, then
The purpose, Mr. President, is to compel the government to enact the Bangsamoro Basic Law.
I don't think it will fall under the provisions of this proposed measure, Mr. President.
Why is that, Mr. President? the proposed measure says to induce the government or the public to do or abstain from doing any act. Now, compelling or inducing or compelling the government to pass the Bangsamoro Basic Law, would that put us in danger of being labeled as a terrorist?
Well, I suppose what they're fighting for is their right for their self-determination, Mr. President.
And yes.
So
the
it
right-
may not constitute a terrorist act.
We must be very careful because I agree with the good gentleman that in our, if you look at history, there were struggles for independence that was attended by violence. I don't think history will be kind to us if we call them terrorists.
No, Mr. President, we will not call them terrorists. We'll always be, I repeat, we'll always be bound by the purpose as enumerated.
Yes.
With the permission of the two gentlemen, Mr. President, a little interjection. Given the example of, Mr. President,
Yes, Senator Pimentel.
just to pursue the example of the minority leader, Mr. Sponsor, if I may. For example, even if in the end they are cleared of terrorism charges because they were ruled to have just exercised fundamental rights, wanting to exercise the right to self-determination. But in the meantime, some of them, or many of them, would have spent time in jail, being held. So that is probably one danger that we should guard against, because maybe at the end nga, sabi nga na it did not amount to a terrorist act, but there is some suffering which will be inflicted upon our people because of some vagueness in the law.
Let me cite to you, Mr. President, a jurisprudence, the existing jurisprudence. It is Lagman versus Medialdea. Ang sabi ng Court Suprema po rito, in determining what crime was committed, we have to look into the main objective of the malefactors. If it is political, such as for the purpose of severing the allegiance of Mindanao to the Philippine government to establish a wilayat, therein the crime is rebellion. If, on the other hand, the primary objective is to sow and create a condition of widespread and extraordinary fear and panic among the population in order to coerce the government to give in to an unlawful demand, the crime is terrorism.
That's under present law, Mr. President.
That's jurisprudence.
Yes, that's right. That's jurisprudence based
Covering the Human
based
Security
on
Act.
present law, which the
Yeah.
bill seeks to overhaul.
Yes,
Yan na,
Mr.
that's why we are now. I'm appreciating the interpellation of the minority leader, because we're testing now the concepts in this overhauled bill.
Same here, Mr. President.
Yes, the present law has been interpreted by the Supreme Court. So if we are happy with that,
We're not happy.
kaya nga, precisely. The next question is, why did we overhaul? So if we are overhauling, we must be very clear with concepts, because we might endanger fundamental freedoms or rights, even though we say that they are protected. I hope I'm clear, because even at the end of the trial, let us say that persons are acquitted, but the length of the trial, they suffered some of their
That
rights.
is correct. That's a
Thank you,
correct
Mr. President.
observation. And valid concern, Mr. President.
I'll ask
I'm glad to be interpolated by a bar top notcher and another placer in the bar, Mr. President. Being a non-lawyer, I'm so proud to be in the midst of these two gentlemen, Mr. President.
And if you notice, Mr. President, the questions are without malice. It is an attempt to clarify the provisions of the proposal.
And we're very grateful, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. President, one naughty question. Was Senator Gregorio Honasan
A terrorist?
would have been a terrorist? If we had the law, would Senator Honasan been a terrorist?
No, Mr. President, he would be guilty of violation of coup d'etat.
He's in
Article
violation-
134A ba ito? Yeah.
No, no, Mr. President.
Because the elements are different.
Yes. I don't know, that's subject to debate, but from the way I read your present bill, Senator Honasan would be a terrorist.
Not really, Mr. President, but he would be a coup plotter who always failed, by the way, Mr. President, who never succeeded.
Mr. President, at this point, Mr.
No, he succeeded at the first time.
It's a dos.
yeah,
It's a one, Mr. President. After that, he was a consistent failure.
Mr. President, may I request that
Dami.
I suspend my interpellation? Because if you look at the hall, there are only 6 of us, and these are very important issues that we are raising, which I had hoped would be listened to by our colleagues, so that when we come to a vote, it would be an intelligent vote. And it is on that point, at this point, Mr. President, with the indulgence and probably with the consent of the good gentleman sponsor, we would like to
I
suspend.
agree with your observation. Anyway, it's better that we discuss this very deliberately, Mr. President.
So we move to suspend the course of interpretation.
We suspend the interpellation or the session?
I move to suspend the session for 1 Senate minute,
and
Mr.
the
President.
interpellation,
All right.
Mr. President, until
We
we have
suspend the interpellation of Senator Delon and suspend the session for a few minutes. Few Senate minutes.
Tama ka dito, Prof, tama ka. Tawagin natin sila.
All right. Session resumed. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, may recognize us the Minority Floor Leader, Mr. President.
Senator Frank Drilon, the Minority Leader.
Mr. President, after we suspended the session, Senator Lacson and I had a conversation, and given the fact that the other chamber, meaning the House, is still far from coming up with the bill, in fact, it's just in the committee, we have agreed that we will suspend our interpellation until next month when we come back for our session. So with that agreement with the good sponsor, this representation suspends, with the consent of the chamber, our availment of the period of interpellation.
The period of interpellation. Anyway, the Majority Leader would like to entertain a motion to suspend consideration of the measure.
Yes, Mr. President, with that, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1083. So moved.
Any objection? Hearing none, suspended. Consideration is suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we have another measure to tackle, a couple of more measures, Mr. President, particularly on a bill that is close to my heart and the heart of Senator Coco. This is on the bamboo industry. Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to transfer from the calendar of ordinary business to special orders, Senate Bill number 1240. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, consideration of the measure is in order.
Mr. President, may I ask,
Is this already in the calendar for our special orders?
Di ba po, we're moving it. We're transferring
okay.
it now to special
Okay,
order.
sorry. So the motion is to transfer.
Yes, Mr. President.
That's all right. So transferred.
Mr. President, I move that we consider Senate Bill number 1240.
Hearing no objection, consideration is in order.
May we ask the Secretary to read the title? please?
Secretary will read the title of the measure.
Senate Bill number 1240, an act institutionalizing bamboo industry development in the Philippines, creating the Bamboo Industry Development Center, prorating funds therefore and for other purposes.
Mr. President,
Yes.
may we recognize our distinguished sponsor, no other than my kababayan from Mindanao, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III, Chairman of the Committee on Trade and Commerce.
The gentleman from Mindanao, former Senate President, Aquilino Pimentel III is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Senate President, Majority Leader. Mr. President and my esteemed colleagues, and our honored guests, and ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Bamboo is a quick-growing, versatile, non-timber forest product, which is often used as a wood substitute. It is found in different regions of the world and is utilized extensively for a wide range of purposes such as walls, panels, handicrafts, consumer products, and novelty products. There are over 1,000 bamboo species in the world, and bamboo industries are now thriving not only in Asia, but also in other continents as well. In the Philippines, there are about 62 species of bamboo, 21 of which are endemic or native to the country, while the rest are introduced or were introduced from other countries such as China. The bamboo provides environmental benefits to the society. It is a sustainable resource that can grow under a range of climatic conditions. It provides approximately 35% more oxygen and absorbs 40% more carbon dioxide as compared to trees, which result in improvement in the air quality. Further, cultivation of bamboo provides organic matter, controls soil erosion, and regulates water levels in watersheds. In 2018, the global bamboo market is valued at $68.8 billion and is expected to grow about 5% more from 2019 to 2025. This industry has so much potential. However, despite the bamboo's importance, statistics on its resources, production, and trade in the Philippines remain scarce and inconsistent, hence unreliable. The lack of reliable and comprehensive data on Philippine bamboo resources and utilization hinders its sustainable development and limits bamboo's potential to contribute to the Philippine economy. The DTI, DOST, DNR, and DA, under their respective mandates, have tried to address the issue of insufficiency of bamboo information and resources through various research and studies. The aim is to provide a comprehensive assessment of the Philippines' bamboo resources. However, the lack of a specific body concentrated on studying and developing the bamboo industry makes it harder for the government to unlock its true potential. There is a need to properly gather data and information on the production and commercial use of bamboo products in order to tap its full potential. This will not only provide additional resources to boost our economy, but also livelihood opportunities for many individuals, groups, and communities in our country. Therefore, the Committee on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, jointly with the Committees on Finance and Ways and Means, are proposing Committee Report Number 31, or the Bamboo Industry Development Act of 2019. This report, or substitute bill, is the result of hearings by the committee on Senate bills authored by Senator Cynthia Villar and Senator Mig Subiri. So this representation sincerely thanks the authors of the bills for focusing our attention on the bamboo industry and opening our eyes to the importance of the said industry and of bamboo as a plant, Mr. President. And this representation would also like to thank the supporters of this effort who are here with us. Some of them are here with us this afternoon from the DNR Ecosystems Research and Development Bureau, Mr. Sir J. Jimenez, from the Bamboo Industry Development and formerly from DOST FPRDI, Dr. Florentino Tesoro, from Bambuhay, Mr. Mark Gersava, from DTI BOI, Ms. Graciela Watco, among others. This bill seeks to institutionalize bamboo industry development in the Philippines by strengthening the Philippine Bamboo Industry Development Council, which shall be administratively attached to the DTI, and creating the Bamboo Industry Development Center, the one-stop shop for all bamboo industry-related activities, from research and development to trade promotion and education. The bill also highlights the duty of the DNR to ensure the production and propagation of bamboo for commercialization and to collect accurate data on bamboo species in the Philippines. DOST FPRDI, which is the Forest Products Research and Development Institute, is also designated as the main research and development arm for bamboo utilization. It is hoped that through this initiative, we will be able to maximize the full potential of our bamboo resources. Furthermore, to encourage investors in bamboo nurseries and plantations, incentives are provided, such as the exemption from payment of any government share for the use of public lands for commercial bamboo plantation for a period of 10 years, among others. Through these initiatives, the government will be able to collect complete and accurate data on bamboo for commercialization to maximize the benefits of producing bamboo and developing the bamboo industry. Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues, I would like to seek your full support for the immediate passage of this bill. I believe that through this initiative, the bamboo industry will benefit the Filipino people. But before I end, I would like to give you, my dear colleagues, bamboo straws given to us by our friends in the bamboo industry. Maraming salamat po sa inyo lahat.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may I be allowed also to co-sponsor the measure?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. President, somewhere between 44 to 53,000 hectares of bamboo stand across our islands. The bamboo industry is one of the biggest areas of agricultural potential for our country. Even now, without a dedicated institution and development plan to guide the growth of the industry, bamboo has somehow managed to weather the storm. Like the grass itself, the industry has proven itself resilient in the face of many challenges. Despite all odds, the bamboo has managed to keep its relevance as one of our most defining cultural signifiers, bringing a uniquely Filipino stamp to such things as the humble Bahay Kubo, or the 200-year-old bamboo organ of Las Piñas, or the innovative works celebrated by architects and designers like Bobby Manyosa or Kenneth Cobonpue. But we cannot let the future of the bamboo plant lie entirely on its cultural cachet. Right now, we are the 5th biggest bamboo industry in the world. But our numbers pale in comparison to the billion-dollar bamboo industries of China and Vietnam. This is unfortunate given that we have 21 bamboo species native to the country, in addition to 60 to 80 introduced species that we also grow in our lands. We really could and should be going toe-to-toe with the bamboo exporting heavyweights that are currently leaving us in the dust. Instead, we have left the industry to its own devices and given it very little support. We do not even have a dedicated institution to oversee the development of the industry, equivalent to the role of the Philippine Coconut Authority, for instance, or the Sugar Regulatory Administration. Our bamboo development initiatives are pursued by different entities who are unable to synergize their efforts towards the development of the industry as a whole. Without a governing institution in place, Mr. President, the bamboo industry continues to grow stagnant. The necessary research and development towards the modernization of the field is not prioritized and funded, leaving us dated processing and utilization technologies. The performance of the sector is also left unassessed, given that no institution is in charge of collecting and analyzing data regarding the industry's raw materials, employment rates, and economic impact. In order to truly champion agricultural development, we need to grant proper support to all our agricultural industries, which means ensuring that the bamboo industry gets its due. This bill aims to do just that, Mr. President. Under this bill, the creation of the bamboo industry roadmap will set the industry on track for sustainable growth and overseen and supported by a proposed Philippine Bamboo Industry Development Council, which will operate under the Department of Trade and Industry. The council will be attached to the DTI so it can prioritize the economic potential of the industry and take advantage of rising demand for international bamboo market. But the DTI fulfills that mandate, and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources will also be heavily involved in the Council's programs, tasked to ensure the industry's economic growth will not come at the cost of ecological destruction. With the Council in place, the industry will no longer have to struggle to succeed as a fractured sector. And I'd like to add, Mr. President, I'd like to add that in my many years trying to push this measure, whenever we ask the agency in charge, ang tinuturo nila, DA. Pagdating sa DA, DENR. Hinihingi ng DNR, hinihingi ng DA. And yet, they give very little to the promotion of bamboo. So we're happy that the DTI has taken its place and has taken the cudgels for the promotion of the bamboo industry. So now, Mr. President, we will, with this measure, have a coordinating body that will bring disparate industry players together and guide them towards unified success. And with the roadmap as guide, as formulated by the Council, the industry will have a clear and focused path to carving its place as one of the bamboo heavyweights of the world market. A strengthened bamboo industry will also be immensely beneficial to the environment, as bamboo prevents soil erosion and flooding, and it is known to be a particularly effective agent of carbon capture, meaning it traps and isolates carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. A healthier bamboo sector then will mean a healthier environment for us all. You know, Mr. President, in my farm in Batangas, I planted a bamboo, I put up a bamboo farm, which I got from the Carolina Farms, no? Of Mrs. Jimenez, the wife of Sir Maynard Jimenez of GMA7. And we were able to buy, there's such a thing called Buddha bamboo, which is a very cute pygmy bamboo, because it grows only by about 10 feet, and it has little stomachs like a Buddha, like lots of ripples in the stomach. And it's called Buddha bamboo, and we also have iron bamboo. It's all black, super matigas. Hindi, pag ginagamitan mo ng bolo yan at itak, ay nasisira at napupurol yung itak. Meron po yung mga variegated bamboo that I like as well. One of my favorites, which is green and yellow bamboo. And many, many others. We have in Bukidnon, Mr. President, what we call the giant bamboo. It has a circumferential of, it's about this thick, like a tree, and it grows as high as 100 feet tall, found in the areas of Impasugong and in Malaybalay, Bukidnon, Mr. President. So there's so much potential in the bamboo industry, so much so that my house, Mr. President, the flooring was made out of bamboo. It looks like wood panels, but it's actually bamboo. So it's what you call engineered wood, but made out of bamboo slats. So there's so much potential in the industry, Mr. President, and there's such a great demand for it in local and international markets, especially in architecture and design, in chemical and medical industries, and the culinary industry. These markets are hungry and waiting. We just need to help the local bamboo industry get on track to fulfill that demand, and that help will come from in the form of the Development Roadmap and the Development Council. The growth of the bamboo industry will mark a huge win for the nation, economically, culturally, and even environmentally. And even, Mr. President, the provinces, for example, of Iloilo, whenever you go to Iloilo, they've got a huge bamboo industry. Wherever I go, from the mountains of Iloilo up to the coastal areas, meron po silang kawayan dun. In the island of Panay, they also utilize a lot of bamboo. And of course in Mindanao. And as I said, it's so easy to grow, and siya po ang naiiwan pag may bagyo. We all know, of course, the fabled story on the bamboo, where the mighty tree, once the typhoon comes, sometimes succumbs to its winds and falls into the ground. But it's the bamboo with its elasticity and survivability and resilience is what remains and survives. As such, Mr. President, I urge our colleagues to join us in seeing the passage of this important measure. Mabuhay po, and maraming salamat po, Mr. President. Thank you. Vice Chairman.
Majority Leader.
Thank you. With that, Mr. President, we just have to allow our colleagues to study the measure further. I move that we suspend consideration of the same.
Any objection?
Before we suspend, Mr. President, there's a request from our colleague, Senator Win Gatchalian, that he be made a co-author of the measure.
All right, we place that on record. So hearing no objection, the suspended consideration of the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I ask for 1 minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
Thank you.
Ayaw nga.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session resumed.
Mr. President, I believe there's an additional conference to the BICAM, Mr. President. I so move.
Yes, for the Bicameral Conference Committee on the disagreeing votes on the budget, the Senator,
This is on the taxes, Mr. President.
on the tax measure, Senate Bill, House Bill, Senate Bill 1074. Senator Della Rosa, Ronald Della Rosa is designated as an additional member of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Minority Floor Leader, before we adjourn, the Minority Floor Leader and I had spoken earlier, and he presented to me the speech, that there was a speech made last November 25 by the distinguished member of this chamber, Senator Bongo. It's a speech about the Southeast Asian Games, Mr. President. We did not refer, the Minority Floor Leader pointed out correctly that we did not refer the speech to any committee. So therefore, Mr. President, I move that we refer the committee to the Blue Ribbon Committee as well as Committee on Sports, a secondary committee.
All right, so referred. And just for the record, related to the approval of the two resolutions that we passed earlier, or the two gold medalists in the recent SEA Games, I made a mispronouncement by saying that Senate Resolution PS Resolution 245 was taking into consideration PS Resolution 246. No,
It's two separate
it's a
resolutions,
these are two separately approved resolutions.
Yes, Mr.
So what we approved, for the record, is PS Resolution 245. And then thereafter, we are correctly manifesting that we also are approving PS Resolution 246.
Yes,
and
Mr.
not
President.
what the presiding officer mentioned as taking into consideration.
Yes,
For
Mr.
the
President.
record. All right, so we ask that the records reflect in today's session.
Mr. President, may I ask for 1 minute suspension?
So, session suspended.
Si Drew Holiday, pamimigay niya naman. Ewan ko, madaming dito na. Galing. Ako Everton. Fan ako ng Everton. Fan ako ng Everton. Lang niya pati maluo. Sandbagging. Pa-replace mo na ako second half. Ako sabi ko, no? Actually, dito daw. Ano ba yan? Na may sinasabi sa akin. The bigger one is for tabu. The smaller one is for drink. Hindi pa na. That one's for bulago. Bulago, hindi ko dun gagawin. Sirao. Sirao ulo hindi. Hindi nga, ano nga to? Ito yung pag nag-swimming ka. Gano'n na, mix. Pag nag-swimming ka. Ninja. Yung pagka yung snorkeling. Oo, ninja. Hindi, papel. Bigyan mo akong papel. You're more scared of gaming than... Nalabanan kita. Ako, lumaban ako sumpit dati. Mga bata ako sumpit. Talaga yung atakihan kayo. Bongo, alam niyo ba yan? Sa Bulacan. Talaga ano? Yan may ano, may... So, more severe, more... Okay, gusto mo. Ay, tsaka natutunin dito.
Session resumed. Majority Leader, there is an even number in the bicameral conference committee. Therefore, we would like to designate an additional member. Senator Coco Pimentel is also added member of the Bicam Conference Committee on 1074. 1074, right?
That's correct,
All right.
Mr. President.
Okay. So designated.
Okay, Mr. President, with that, I move that we adjourn session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Wednesday. Before we adjourn, Mr. President, I'd just like to greet also Senator Manny Pacquiao once again. Happy birthday. And that's it, Mr. President. I can go early to my dinner to my wife.
And happy wedding anniversary to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Tayong mga matsunurin na mga asawa.
All right.
Member ng uhaw, Mr. President. Alam niyo po yung member ng uhaw?
Ano yung uhaw?
Union of Husbands Afraid of Wives.
All right.
So kaya uhaw na rin ako, Mr. President. Adjourn till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Wednesday, December 18. I so move, Mr. President, 2019.
All right. Any objections? Hearing none, the session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, December 18, 2019.